Hi everyone, welcome to the Colour Cave where we like to play with art stuff. It's Jem here, and today I'm going to be tackling the August Scrawlr challenge, for which the prompt is false prayer. I was super excited about this when I opened my Scrawlr box because the contents of the box were absolutely awesome, and I'm super excited about it because it's been a while since I have done any painting. I am not a painter, but I think that's why I am looking forward to it so much, because I haven't put that pressure on myself. The same as if it would been pencils, I would expect to create something that's half decent. Whereas because I have absolutely no clue what I'm doing, it's just me goofing around with some paint, which is awesome. So if you would like to know what's in the Scrawlr box this month, you can click on the card and go and watch that video of me unboxing and getting really excited about contents of said box. And then you can come back here and I will gather together everything from the Scrawlr box and we can get going. So after experimenting with the needed eraser, it didn't really lift a lot of this particular pencil very well, so I'm trying to keep my lines as light as possible here, which is also why I've kept this section really short, because you can't actually see what I'm drawing. The prompt kind of bamboozled me a little bit and I really didn't know what I was going to do with it, because I didn't want it to be particularly religious, so I have taken it very loosely and you'll see as I go along. I tried to do a wash here, listen to me pretending I know what I'm doing, and I was a wee bit nervous about it because of the size of the brush and the fact that I'm just not that experienced with stuff like this, but overall it turned out okay. So just going back to the prompt for a minute, I decided to take it in its loosest sense and went with the idea of a wolf in sheep's clothing, which relates to false prophets and false teachers. So that was kind of the idea behind it, so it's a bit of a tenuous link. But as I say, I'm not a particularly religious person and I didn't want to take the prompt in a literal sense. So I switched over here and started the wash on the other side with a slightly darker colour. Now what I actually did was I took the two sheets of paper that came in the Scrawlr box and stuck them together, and I have the sheep on one side and the wolf on the other. So that worked out kind of good. The wash on the second side is a bit patchy, as you can see, but as I say, for someone like me who really is just playing about with paint, well, I did my best really, especially with the little travel brush that was provided. So the next thing that I wanted to do here was I wanted to pencil in the lines that I was going to activate with water, so they would be permanent before I started chucking paint at the paper. So this is me sort of going in and darkening down the lines that I want to keep before I go over them with the water brush. To make my sheep a little bit more interesting, and again to kind of fit in with the theme of the prompt, I decided to adorn my sheepy head with some jewels as a nod towards a sort of enticement by this wolf who's trying to sort of lure people into some sort of false sense of security. And also as well, it gave me a chance to use all the pretty colours that were in the palette that came in the tin. Going in with the water brush on top of the aquarelle pencil was quite interesting, particularly on this left side of the piece, because naturally my instinct was to make my sheep white, so therefore all the sort of shading and everything, it made sense to do it with the pencil. So I was trying to direct my brush strokes so that it would reflect that shadow rather than just sort of, you know, scribbling over the lines that I had already put in. And I had to think quite hard about which way I was sending the brush, and you can see there I'm starting to do the horn here and the ridges that run along the top of it. So I just sort of mimicked that motion in a sort of zigzaggy fashion to try and keep that texture of the original pencil lines that I'd made. One of the things that took a lot of time with this picture was figuring out where I was going to work next in order to give the water time to dry. So I spent quite a lot of time planning out what section of the picture I was going to work in next. And not only that, but I had to decide whether or not certain parts needed another layer of the same colour of paint, and one of those areas is this eye, because I wanted it to be quite a deep dark black. Now I tried on the first go over, if you like, to keep the paint as sort of dry as possible, because that kept the vibrancy, to save me having to go over it multiple times. I know pencil is a really slow medium and I have the patience for it, but one of the things about doing this picture that really sort of got to me was the fact that I had to wait for all these layers to dry, whereas with pencil you are using multiple layers and it takes a while to get through it, but you don't have to sort of, you know, stand about whistling a tune waiting. You can just go back over it straight away. So that was kind of weird, but I suppose, you know, patience is a virtue, one would say. I decided to add a little bit of brown in here just to make it a wee bit more interesting, although I wanted the face to be white. Sheep, funnily enough, is something that I look at most days, and I'm particularly familiar with their faces. And the breeds that do have a white face, some of them do tend to have black and or brown markings sometimes, so I thought I would just chuck that in there and make it, you know, a little bit more interesting. I just love this red colour, it's so pretty, and I'm glad I decided to put in these little sort of jewels because it gave me a chance to have some fun and use the bright colours and really show off what these paints were intended for, which is the, you know, the really sort of vibrant, intense colour. And yeah, it's just one of those ones where you look at that palette and you're like, I want to use all the colours. So I started to work on the horn here, and I think this was probably on the left side of the picture anyway. This was the bit that I knew that was going to challenge me the most, because I knew where I wanted the shadows to be and the ridges and things, but I don't have the experience to have that sort of control over watercolours the same way as I would with pens or pencils. So again, it's one of those ones where I was trying to think as I went along, and I was trying to dilute the paint where necessary to get that nice sort of shadow and then into the lighter part. So this was a panic moment. When I started putting this dark brown down, I just kind of thought to myself, what have you done? And I just decided that I was just going to have to be brave and get on with it. So I felt that the initial colour that I'd put down was too dark, so rather than continuing to load up the brush, I just kept working over it while it was still wet with more water to dilute it and soften it out. And I have to say that that is one of the advantages of watercolour, and I am so glad for it. So on the right hand side with our wolf, I followed the loose sort of structure that I had on the left, and I went back in with the pencil here and started to decide what lines I wanted to use the water brush with, and just work my way through and start darkening them down. I knew that with the wolf I was going to have to use quite a few layers of paint, and that is one of the things about this paper. It is absolutely fantastic. It just takes it and takes it and takes it. As long as you let each layer dry, this paper seems to be able to go on forever when it comes to taking on board water. So bearing that in mind, when I was working on the wolf side of the page, every time I used a different colour, I made sure that I put it in every location on the face of the wolf where I wanted it, so that that could dry while I was doing something else, and I could build up more and more layers of that colour over time after each coat was dry. I did make it reasonably patchy because I wanted to try and capture a bit of a sort of fur texture, and again, it's not something I'm experienced or skilled at, but I figured that using the sort of flicky brush strokes was the best way to go. Being a pencil person, I couldn't resist the urge to go back in with my pencil on the left hand side of the picture, and really what I wanted to do was just add in a little bit more detail and a little bit more texture, which I felt I didn't have the control with when I was using the water brush, and I think that's partially the brush and partially my lack of experience. So I've just added in a little bit of shadow here and there, and I just think it helped to sort of finish it off a little bit. I did feel it was a little bit bare and lacking something, and I was a lot more satisfied after I'd gone back over with that pencil. Although I hadn't put any pressure on myself with this piece of art, one thing I really wanted to get right was the wolf's eye. I wanted it to really stand out and I wanted it to look kind of menacing, and I used the paint situation to my advantage here by adding in that very dark green while the lighter green was still wet and working it in to give that nice sort of sinister looking shadow around the bottom part of his eye, and I am super pleased with how that turned out. Even if I'd totally messed up the rest of the picture, I would still be pleased because that eye turned out exactly the way I had envisioned. So this was kind of my only regret with this picture, was this part of the ear where I'm using this purple. I wish I had started with a lighter wash and built up the colour, and it's just one of those things where I just chalked it up to experience. I don't think it's ruined my picture, but I was just dissatisfied with it because I think I could have got a bit more shadow and depth in at the curve of the ear where the blue part of the fur comes over. So I think I just went in with too much gusto and a bit of a heavy hand there, but it's one of those things. That's a lesson learned for me for next time. You know, everything's a learning curve right now, especially when it comes to paint, because yeah, well, we know about that. But I'm just back to building up some layers here, and I really enjoyed mixing the blues with the black to give these varying shades of sort of petrol blue. I got some really nice colours out of it, and I did a wee bit of experimenting in between as well, and I was amazed at the different shades I could get out of those colours. It would still have been really nice to have a white in the set. I think that might have made things a bit easier. Having looked up online at the travel set, that is the only way that it comes, and you can buy replacement pans for it, but they are only available in the colours that the original set comes with, so you can't kind of mix and match to suit yourself, which is a bit of a shame, I think. But the longer I went on and the more I worked on this piece, I realised that not having a white wasn't such a big deal after all, so I was still a happy camper by the end of it. I felt it was important that our wolfie friend here looked as menacing as possible, so I spent quite a bit of time working on his snarl and his mouth, and I wanted to make sure that all of his teeth were quite well defined and that you could see these great big, sort of shiny gnashers, just to sort of put out there that he's an angry dude and he's nasty, and that you don't want to mess with him. So I sort of did a bit of adjusting with his teeth with my eraser because there were some pencil lines in there and I wanted the white of the teeth to stand out, so that worked out quite well as well. So the same thing on the right hand side as I did in the left. I'm just going back with my pencil and putting in a little bit of shadow with that much finer point, and just adding in a few sort of more furry flicks than one thing and another, just to sort of finish him off a little bit. Lastly, I just did a little bit of a patch job there on the right hand side. I noticed there was a part where the paint hadn't taken in the background, so I just kind of tried to cover that over as best I could. And after that was pretty much it done and dusted, and I have to say I'm quite impressed with myself, so I'm a happy camper with that, and all that was left for me to do is to sign the bottom of the picture. I hope you've enjoyed watching how I got on with this month's prompt. It's been great fun. It's probably one of the better Scrawlr challenges that I've done, and I've thoroughly enjoyed myself and looking forward to doing some more. So if you like this video, you know what to do, guys. You can give us a thumbs up, and if you haven't subscribed to the channel and you quite enjoy watching this sort of thing, please feel free to join us in the cave, and you can hit the notification bell if you want to know when our videos are up. It is usually a Monday and a Friday, and we do have a mixture of different types of arty pursuits to make sure that we keep things fresh and exciting and just play about with art stuff and generally have a good time. There we go, so that's me taking the tape off, and I have my 2 halves and I have my wolf in sheep's clothing. So I would say that is a reasonably successful attempt. Couldn't have asked for much more than that. So thanks again for watching, guys. Everybody's happy. We'll see you next time in the cave. Bye for now.